Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Our Scientology Stories. My name is Mark Fisher, and I want to welcome my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hi, Janis.
Aloha, Mark.
Good day,
Good
mate.
day, everybody.
That's right. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real good. It's been a wonderful morning. I've gone for a swim. I've gone for a horse ride. I'm ready to go.
And you played with Henrietta the rooster and the chickens. I heard that earlier, right?
I did not play with Henrietta, but Henry did come charging at me when I went in there to get some eggs this morning. So I have to quickly try and block my legs from Henry coming at him.
Okay, great. We've got a special guest today that we're recording the show on. But before we do that, I just want to remind people to please subscribe to our channel at Mark Fisher and Janis Gillham Grady, all one word, at YouTube. We appreciate the support. We're getting close to 8,000 subscribers. And if you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed, please click that subscribe button and hit that like button. It definitely helps get the word out to other people. And so we would appreciate that. Janis, do you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
After I tell them you rock slam the like button.
Okay.
You don't just hit it. You rock slam it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yes. Well, our guest today, you've all met before. We've done a few interviews with her husband, Neville Chamberlin. And so today we are talking to the better half of the two, Danielle Chamberlin.
Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
Hello. Sorry about the yellow screen.
That's okay.
There. That's okay. Now, Danielle grew up in what was known as Rhodesia. Now it's Zimbabwe. And she got into Scientology around 6 years old. And she's had an adventurous life since. And we're going to discuss that with her.
That's right. And you're in England right now, right? Tell everybody where you're at.
Yeah, I'm in the northeast of England, about 2 hours south of Edinburgh.
And like we talked before, you're in Sunderland or whatever. And I remember there used to be a Sunderland, Oregon. You said there still is, right?
Well, there still is, but there's not much activity there. Occasionally, I see somebody out on the front. The front door's always locked. I believe access is from round the back up a sort of fire escape affair. Never see any activity, ever.
Right.
None. There was one occasion recently where someone from the org went into my hairdressers and tried to recruit some people and started looking up into the corner of the room and pointing and saying, "Hey guys, I can see something in the corner." And they thought it was so weird and they just kicked him out.
What did he think he saw in the corner?
Yeah.
They had no idea. We don't know. It was very odd.
He probably didn't know either.
No. Guys, I'm sorry about the color. I have no, Mark, any suggestions? I don't know why I'm bright yellow.
I don't. It's just if you there now, you're better there. So, but it's okay. Just don't move your camera around. That'll help.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
Very yellow.
Okay. Yeah, now you look proper.
Yeah,
so if you just move closer, maybe that'll do it. But you're just fine right there.
No, I think
there you
I'll
go.
stay back. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, like you said, Janis, we did actually 3 videos with Danielle's husband, Neville Chamberlin. We did St. Hill and the Sea Project. And then we did Scientology Invades by Sea down in Spain with Neville. That's part 1. And we did part 2. And Janis was just a little waif on the ocean. And that was a fun interview, right, Janis?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of memories coming back with that one.
Well, if you haven't seen these, viewers, you can find them on our channels. They're on our playlists, and they're historical and very funny. And Neville's a great storyteller. And anyway, so we've got those there. But today it's Danielle, and we'll show you here. Danielle, why don't you go ahead and explain who's this?
So this is my father, Jean Lafitte, a Frenchman, and my mother, Jenny, who was Jennifer Seymour Smith. And they met in France, in Paris, and went over to Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, and then down to South Africa, where my mother joined a Scientology mission.
Okay. And then the next picture here, who's that?
That's me, about age 2 in Zimbabwe.
And then how did your parents get involved in Scientology?
There were some mission holders in Johannesburg called Jos and Hilda Jaffe, and my mother got involved through them. And so I was in Joburg Org by the age of about 6 doing TRs.
But your father was not involved, or he got involved with your mother?
No, he got involved with my mother, but it turned out that my father was a plant. So we found that out in 1971, which resulted in the end of my parents' relationship. He was a plant in the Johannesburg Org at the behest of the, I don't know the exact name, but the Mental Health Organization for South Africa.
Yeah, and just to explain to our viewers, a plant in Scientology terms, that's somebody who's a spy. They basically are there not with good intentions towards the organization, and Hubbard called them plants. They were planted in the organization, so that's what a plant is. So your father was planted in or put into the organization, like you said, by the mental health agency.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know. I know that Jane Kember knew more about it at the time, because Jane was around the Joburg Org when I was a kid, I seem to remember.
Yes.
And so she was involved in him getting outed, as it were.
And Jane Kember was the guardian. She was in charge of the guardian's office. Mary Sue Hubbard oversaw Jane Kember. Jane Kember, Mary Sue was her boss, but basically the Guardian's office was the precursor to the Office of Special Affairs, and they handled all the Scientology legal and security and that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, so, Jane had been around for quite a while, because in 1962, when my parents went to St. Hill, my mother and Jane twinned on the St. Hill Special Briefing course together.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So tell us about getting involved in Scientology in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe at the time, and what your parents, like, when was it discovered your father was a plant, and, you know, just give us some background on all of that.
Well, it might be more pertinent if we go back a little bit, because I was only, I think, about 4 when I came down to South Africa from Zimbabwe. So we missed L. Ron Hubbard going to Zimbabwe. So you might want to talk about that. But he arrived in Zimbabwe in 1966, having already been in Johannesburg around 1960, I believe.
Janis, I'm sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, he was, we missed seeing him. So we were down in South Africa and he was up in Zimbabwe.
Janis, why don't you tell the story about why Hubbard was in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe? Why was he there?
Well, he'd been living in England, and the British wanted to kick him out and called him an undesirable alien. And so Hubbard said he was going down there to find a new location, and went to Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia at the time. And this is a picture that taken of him when we were on the ship. He was going to do a whole thing, and he was talking about how he was Cecil Rhodes in a past
Cecil
lifetime.
Rhodes, yeah.
Cecil Rhodes in a past lifetime. And so he wanted some photos taken looking like him, and he's all dressed up. And then when Kimma pointed out to him, because Kimma was from Rhodesia, she pointed out to him that Cecil Rhodes was known to have been gay, at which point he never mentioned again his past life as Cecil Rhodes.
Janis, explain Kimma. Who's Kimma?
Kimma was the Commodore's, or LRH's steward. She also did medical for him, and she was in charge of his household unit. So, and she had been a trained nurse down in Rhodesia.
She was a lovely lady, Kimma.
Yes, she was a great woman.
So he was down there, and then what happened while he was there? This is him there, right?
Yeah, so while he was down there, I believe he purchased, he had a house, he purchased a hotel, and he was going to set up, like St. Hill, he was going to set it up down there in Rhodesia. And while there, he started trying to get involved with the government, which he always did. And as a result, he always got kicked out of that country for trying to get involved. And at that time, Ian Smith was the prime minister, right?
Yeah, and my two cousins worked with Ian Smith, but because they're not saying much, I have asked them, but I think they signed the Official Secrets Act, so they can't say anything, sadly.
But you can say what you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was so young, Janis, and so all I know is what I've read. And I was telling Mark earlier that Russell Miller in The Barefaced Messiah talks a lot about what LRH did when he was there. I know that he bought the hotel at Booby Hills and he wanted to expand it there. But he was so full of himself, you know, he really did think that he could go and just wine and dine the prime ministers and the prime minister's wife. I read a story today about him having ordered some pink champagne, 2 bottles, because they couldn't get it in Rhodesia at the time. And when he tried to present this champagne, they said, you know, well, this isn't going to buy you anything. They wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't let him in the door. He went to try and laud and applaud them, and he wasn't allowed entrance, and he was really put out. You know, he couldn't understand it. Oh, no, honestly. He thought he could change the constitution. He thought he could change the whole layout. He thought he could sway the government. And honestly, I don't know what cloud he was living on. He really was in cloud cuckoo land, really.
And do you know what this picture is of, Janis?
The staff. Yeah, with some of the staff, yes.
Yeah, he had a chauffeur, he had a cook, he had a cleaner. You know, he had something for everything.
And then he was kicked out, right?
Yeah, he was kicked out, and he came back to St. Hill. And I remember as a kid, I was at St. Hill, and the word was, Ron's coming back. He's coming back from Rhodesia. Let's all go out to the airport and meet him. And they arranged buses, and everyone got on the bus, and we all went to London to meet Ron at the airport. And here it is, to a hero's welcome. And he's being treated as a big hero. All the staff and public there in the background had no clue that he'd been kicked out of Rhodesia. And they're all there thinking, Ron's coming back. He's been busy down in Rhodesia, researching and so forth. Anyway, so it was a big, exciting moment. And that was the first time, I think it might have been the first time I saw him. And then he shows up at St. Hill, walking around and talking to people and so forth. But yeah, everyone thought it was such a big deal and gave him a hero's welcome. No one had a clue he'd been kicked out. And so now he's been kicked out of Rhodesia. He's an undesirable alien in England, and they want to get rid of him. And he can't go back to the US because they want him on tax evasion. So now he's like, what do I do? Oh, let's go to sea. Well, he then goes down to Morocco, Tangier, and then over to Las Palmas. And then he gets the Diana or the Enchanter, the Avon River, the Royal Scotsman, and the Sea Org, starts expanding.
Yeah, he starts the Sea Project and then the Sea Organization.
Yes.
I just mentioned something in Barefaced Messiah that Russell Miller talks about at that meeting at Heathrow Airport when he came back, was that apparently lots of banners had been made, and no one had got permission from the authorities to swirl the banners, so they weren't allowed to show them. Just an aside.
Crazy.
So that was Hubbard down in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and he was basically kicked out for, they didn't want him down there. So So Danielle, let's go on with your parents' story in Scientology and yours. So how, go ahead and pick it up from where you were.
We were going to the org most weekends. We were sort of public. My father was going in with my mother, and we were doing TR course, and they were doing whatever courses they were doing, communication course, etc. And then when everything hit the fan and my father came out as being a spy, my mother sent my sister and I up to Zimbabwe to go to boarding school and kept my brother with her, and was just working. She was a journalist. So she was working for some newspapers in Johannesburg. And my sister and I were up in boarding school. We were there for about a year when my mother turned up with this man. and he turned out to be her new beau. And he was a Scientologist. He was a member of the public. And she said, "This is going to be your new father." We'd never met him. He had 4 kids. He had 3 boys and a girl. And they were down in Joburg. And he said, "Right, hop into the back of we call it a bucky, which is, I don't know what you call them in Australia, Janis, but a truck with an open back. It's all open at the back, and you just got a
like
cab.
a pickup truck?
A pickup truck, yeah.
Okay.
We used to call it a bucky. So we got in the back of the pickup truck in sleeping bags and went overnight and drove overnight down to his farm in South Africa, only to be confronted by a guy with a shotgun, an Afrikaans guy who had been the tenant on the farm and was refusing to leave. So we camped out in the barn for a few months while he tried to get rid of this guy. Anyway, eventually he left. It was just crazy.
So he even camped out in the barn with you because he couldn't buy his house. Okay.
Yeah. It was hilarious. I mean, we literally had blankets as walls, on washing lines. It was like something from, I don't know, the Victorian times.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a lovely farm, and we had bees and a lake and boats and trampolines and horses and cows and sheep, and it could have been lovely. Apart from my stepbrothers started to abuse us from a second dynamic point of view. Mark, you might want to explain what that means.
Second dynamic.
Never ends, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's second dynamic is family and children and that type of thing. I think people get the gist of what
You
we're
got
talking
it, yeah.
about. We can't
Okay.
say some things on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. So that made it a really miserable year for my sister and brother and I. All 3 of us were abused by them. So one night we were sitting around the dining room table, and my stepbrother started sniggering a bit, and my stepdad took my mother by the hand and said, "Come outside with me." And she was 6 months pregnant with their son. And she said he took her outside, and my mother had a car, a Beetle, a VW Beetle in the back. And in the back of the Beetle was Jill Van Staden. And Jill had been on the ship. She used to be married to Joe Van Staden. And Duncan got in the back with Jill and took her hand and said to my mother, "We're getting married. What are you going to do?" And my mother was 6 months pregnant with his child. And he said, "We'll take the baby." Yeah.
And he was still married to your mother when he did this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a shocker, especially as she was also 6 months pregnant. And in those days, they did let you fly. So she had obviously gone into shock and was really distraught. And she had the 3 of us. And she said, "Right, guys, what are we going to do?" She said, "How about going to England and we can join the Sea Org?" That was kind of how she, and he was quite happy to pay the one-way ticket to her to get her out of the country, and she was allowed to fly. So we flew via Frankfurt with Lufthansa and then on to Heathrow. And we were met at the airport by a guy called Bruce Glushico. And he,
I remember Bruce.
Remember Bruce, yeah. And he drove us to Stonelands. And we were put into a room together as a family, all of us. So that my mother and the 3 kids, and heavily pregnant. And that was my introduction to the Sea Org.
How old were you then?
I was 10 going on 11. We arrived in England in July 73. Or was I 11 going on 12? No, I was 11 going on 12. So we arrived in July, and then by the September, I was sent to the Apollo by myself to become a Commodore's messenger. So that's how I
turned 12.
Yeah.
You just turned 12, yes.
I was just about to turn 12. I actually turned 12 on the Apollo. I was on the Apollo by then.
Oh, okay.
Now, how old are you in these pictures?
This is just before then. So this is just before they split up. Yeah, and I am 10 there.
Okay, and this is the same day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was not happy. That was a very fake smile. Yeah, that's on the top of Table Mountain and age 10. And by then I'd done quite a few courses at the org, but also been put in ethics a lot by my stepdad. I once got put into liability because when I pulled the chair into the dining room table, it scraped the floor. Yeah. You know, things like this.
That's a big no-no. You know that.
Honestly.
What is a floor for?
Yeah.
Honestly, crazy stuff. Yeah, I don't think they wanted us there.
So tell us about how, you know, your trip to the Apollo and the ship and
yeah,
at 12
so
years old. What was that like?
I flew by myself to Lisbon with this little scrap of paper with a phone number on it. And when I arrived there was nobody there to meet me. I thought, well, we went to Lisbon. I thought, what am I doing here? You know, who's going to come? I must have been able to make a phone call with that piece of paper. That's the only thing I can assume. And
Right.
I think I was picked up. Janis, did you say his name was Paul?
Yeah, if he was married to Helena,
Yeah,
the Portuguese lady, then it would have been Paul Preston.
Paul Preston, right. So he took me, I'm pretty sure it was him. So he took me to the ship. And I remember standing on the dock. It was an amazing moment for me because the ship looked massive. I mean, she was at, what was she, 300 and something feet?
60, yeah. 360.
And then I looked up, and on the top there was LRH and Commodore's messengers beside him. And you guys just looked so like cool, you know. And there I was, just kind of, I had these because you had your caps on, you know, you had caps on. And I remember he was looking down and smiling, and I had pigtails and knock-kneed South African, you know, wearing, we call them thongs in Australia, we call them slip-slops in South Africa, you know, flip-flops, whatever. And I just,
yeah.
what have I come to? You know, it's like, wow, have I really arrived here for this? I just had no idea. It was overwhelming. Anyway, I arrived on the ship, and from the minute I was shown my bunk in this dorm down, oh my word, I've never smelt anything like it.
Well, then you didn't walk over to the men's dorm because that smelled.
Oh God, honestly. And the clothes were like, they were all, the clothes were hanging, you know, talk about fitting people above each other. I had a bed below Rachel Cronin, and I just like sobbing. I did not want to be there. So Liz Orsley and Maggie Sabersky came down and tried to console me and said, no, I said I wanted to leave, wanted to go back to my mother. No, you can't leave. No, you can't blow. And they weren't so much into sex checking as they are today. I mean,
No.
Otherwise, no. So I didn't have to go to ethics yet from day one.
But you know, what's amazing is that all these people thought it was okay to send an 11 or 12-year-old without their parents to the ship.
100%.
Yeah, because there was an age limit of saying you have to be 12 or above. Well, you're supposed to show up with your parents, not just come on your own. But they did that to you, and they did it to Shelley, and you know, it was like, it's not okay. But everyone thought it was fine because we're going to clear the planet.
Yeah, and an 11-year-old is just an adult in a kid's body. You know, it's so warped.
Yeah.
It's just so wrong in so many ways. And also, we weren't allowed to tell our parents where we were. So my mother, geographically, had no idea where I was located. Because LRH was on the ship, everything was redacted. So if we wrote a letter, all our letters were read and then blacked out if there was any reference to where we were.
Now, did you ever ask your mother why she thought it was okay to send you?
She said, she told me I begged her to go. And my answer would be, well, why didn't you just say no?
I was 12, 11.
I can only imagine, I can't actually remember the circumstances around being asked to go in the first place, but I can only imagine it was made to seem very exciting. You know, oh, you're going to join LRH, you're going to be a Commodore's messenger. This is going to be the most amazing adventure of your life. You know, you're going to clear the planet and help us clear the planet. And I can just imagine. And so I probably got quite excited. But when reality hit,
that's how it happened to me too. When I was in high school, the Flag Land Base didn't exist yet, and you had this picture of LRH standing on the top of the Apollo, and he had sunglasses on and said, Ron looks to the future with the Sea Organization, you know? And so it looked like this exciting adventure that I was going to be at sea. And then I found out, no, we got rid of the ship and now we're down in Florida.
You know that poster during the Second World War, "We Want You"?
Yeah.
Yes, Uncle Sam.
Yeah. That's what it was like. It's crazy. So yeah, I was on the bunk, and they said, right, okay, you've got to do some mess work. That's physical work. And so they put me painting a cabin. I'd never painted anything in my life because, you know, never. Do you know what? I'd never even made my own bed, because in South Africa we always had people who did it for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Until no, that's not true. At boarding school, I had to make my own bed, but I'd never painted or anything like this. And we were expected to just paint a cabin. But it was right by the Snipes mess. And they were fantastic. They were the engineers on the ship, and they were so welcoming and really funny. You could have a good old joke with them. They were real salt of the earth. I remember, was it Dusty Rhodes and Rocky Stump? And, you know, they were great guys. So for a while, I did lots of physical work, and then I went to work in the galley with Jim Wavell, and that was quite fun. We had to make sure there were no cockroaches on the fried eggs every day. And I made them a huge mistake once of serving the captain. I don't know who the captain was at the time, Bob probably. Served him an egg that had a cockroach on the other side of it. Ethics, liability, downstairs, MAA. Oh boy. Yeah. And also there were lots of STDs in those days, because there were a lot of people hopping into people's bunks.
Oh,
you know? Yeah.
Transmitted diseases.
Yeah. So I don't remember it at that time period. I remember a story earlier where there was someone went to the medical officer with an STD, and then the list grew to 11 people who had been transmitting this to each other.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they had to follow, didn't it? They had to interview everybody. Nev can tell you stories about
Sounds
that.
like the Love Boat.
Yeah, exactly. But why I mention it is that I was a steward at the time on the B deck, on the aft lounge. You remember the galley at the aft lounge at the top of the stairs?
Yeah,
and
the double diner.
Yeah, next to the, I can't remember what you call it, the cabin where you had weddings and guests came.
It was the VIP lounge.
You know those cabins down there next to there?
B-deck aft.
That's where they put everybody into quarantine who had these STDs. And I had to serve them their food. I wasn't allowed to touch the door handles. I had to put the food on the floor, and they had to open the door, take the food, and then when they finished, they had to put the plates out. And I had to go and collect them up and wash them with gloves. Oh my word. I tell you what, I saw some life, you know. As a 12-year-old kid, you grow up bloody fast.
Oh yeah, I went through it too.
Oh,
because I showed up on the same ship at 11 years old.
Yeah, with no parents.
You know, there were fun times, and I learned that I learned all about the ship and raising the ensign and painting decks and scrubbing decks and caulking decks and using the windlass and cleaning out the scuppers and the punkaluvers, and all of that thing. That was quite fun. I quite enjoyed it. But there came a point where I was doing the ironing of the Commodore's messengers uniforms and things like this, and the Commodore's messengers, Janis, a force of their own. They had they were very cliquey, very, very cliquey, and you were either in or out of the group. And I was an outie, I wasn't an innie, it's like,
right.
And so it was very much, and also I saw some abuses going on, like there was this guy, I won't mention his name for his own privacy if he's around, but he was locked up he had been really a delinquent on the ship, but really not great at all. And he'd wanted to leave. And the LRH had him locked up in the twin screw motor room on his own, and he was screaming in terror.
You know who this is, right, Janis?
Was that Lonnie?
Yeah. And I just remember the screaming, and it really shook me to the core. And I really started to get scared. I did not understand what the hell was going on. And I thought, I just want to leave. I just want to leave. And I thought, well, the only way I can leave is I'll just be as naughty as I possibly can. And I was sent to work with the ethics officer at the time, who was Stuart Moreau, who was lovely to me. He was great. And he was married to Joni, and she was sweet too. She was really nice. I had been assigned a buddy called Kenley Moore, but I hardly ever saw her.
Right, she was your miner's mate.
Yeah, my miner's mate, that's it.
Yeah.
And so Stu asked me there was a backlog of knowledge reports to file. And I mean, it was a big backlog. I don't know how tall I was at the time, but it came up to my waist. And I thought, I can't be asked filing all these knowledge reports. So I shredded them all.
Oh,
Boy, did I get into trouble. Oh, my word.
That's
I got
great.
into a lot of trouble. And so that was when Ken had just devised the RPF.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hit the RPF in my black boiler suit and my black armband.
And 12 years old, 13 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I'm sure there were a lot of people thankful that you shredded those knowledge reports.
Oh my word! Honestly, it's just because 12-year-old kid, I can't be asked filing all of those, so I just shredded them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't understand the significance to anybody really of what I'd done, but yeah, it felt good at the time because I didn't have to do the filing. Where am I? So I hit the RPF, and we were based in the forward well deck, down in the hold, and that's where we did our studying at night. And then we used to sleep on hammocks in the near the bosun's cabin. There was a cabin there.
Forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I was on a hammock there. And then we did loads of TRs and auditing and all sorts of things, auditing practice down in the hold at night. And during the day, we were scrubbing decks and running from A to B. And, we couldn't talk to the crew unless they talked to us first. And we couldn't eat until the crew had eaten. And sometimes there wasn't enough food. So sometimes we literally did go without food. I heard Ken say on his interview that you got fed. That's not true. We didn't actually, but then he wasn't on the RPF with us, so he wouldn't have seen.
Right.
But some of us did not eat.
Exactly.
Yeah. The one thing I'm grateful for is that at this time period in England, they went through this winter of discontent where they didn't have any electricity, and they had to cut down. There was a huge oil crisis going on, and and Sebersky had been sent on a mission, and it was quite vile, and the staff had been treated quite poorly. So I missed out on all of that. And when I did
the Battle of Britain.
Yeah. Yeah. It was not great. Anyway, so I'm on the RPF, and I still am not conforming. I still don't. I mean, for instance, we were doing TRs and there was bull baiting. And I had a guy bull baiting me, and he took my bra off in the classroom while he was bull baiting me. And I was this triggered the abuse.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just going,
Yeah, see, that's not the way bull baiting was supposed to work.
No.
That's taking it way too far.
Yeah. And the supervisor went along with it. Yeah.
Just to explain bull baiting to our viewers, basically when you do communications drills called training routines or TRs, one of which you've got to sit there basically confronting the person across from you, and while they're bull baiting, which is basically verbally harassing you and saying outrageous things and doing outrageous things, and you're supposed to sit there, not blink and not react, and that's what the purpose of it is for you to not react to anything that the person says or does. So that's what bull baiting is. Anyway, go ahead, Janis, as you were explaining. That's not what they were supposed to do, though, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was really getting to a point where I was numb. I had no feeling left. I had nothing left. My mother, didn't have my mother. I didn't have any terminals. I didn't have anyone I could go to. I was bereft. I don't know how to describe it other than there was nothing. And one night I was sitting on the tarpaulin of the hold. Over the hold, they had this like a wooden lid, if you like, which had tarp over it. And I was sitting there because I used to get solace from things like watching the dolphins, or I might go and get a few minutes to sit by the stack. This is the big chimney on the ship. Where it was quiet. Yeah, it was lovely and quiet up there. And the deck was clean and it was really peaceful. And the only place I could seek solace was either at night at sea, which was amazing because you're invisible and you can see all the stars. And if the moon was out, it was magical, So there were magical things like, I don't know if you remember, Janis, remember the eclipse of the sun. We went through the eclipse at one point. It was just magic, and the dolphins, just the freedom of the dolphins. And to this day, they're my favorite animal because they're freedom, I just wanted to be free.
No, there is nothing like the roll of a ship as you're sailing along and the wind blowing and, you're looking up at the stuff. Nothing like it.
Magical. And sometimes you could see a storm in the distance, but you'd be in bright sunshine. And as long as you didn't go where the storm was, you were fine. I mean, it was magic. So that sort of thing was lovely. But then I was in Portugal when they threw stones at the ship that time. Do you remember when they had guns trained on the ship?
And that's a whole story that I've got to cover separately.
We've talked about it a little bit, but
yeah, we called it the rock concert, is what we call it.
Well,
the locals threw rocks at us.
I'll never forget it. And it was scary at the time, having guns trained on the ship. But I mean, because we were children, we weren't allowed above decks. Sometimes it was like bad PR. So, but I mean, we were all smoking. I started smoking as soon as I got to the ship. I had my first cigarette at age 12 on the ship. But we weren't allowed to smoke above decks if we were in port, I remember, where we could be seen. Anyway.
Who was in charge of you at the age of 12 on the ship? Like Janis, you had like a miner's mate or something, right? I mean, who was yours?
At this time, there might not have been miner's mates. But I know mine later became Pineapple and then Sandy Wilhair. When Pineapple had to leave on mission, Sandy Wilhair was my miner's mate, is what we called them. And you said yours was Kennelly.
Kennelly Moore, but I hardly ever saw her. The problem is that you can assign someone to be a miner's mate, but they've still got to do their post. They've still got to and then what are they going to do with a kid? What are they going to do?
So was there was nobody checking on you at all, saying how are you doing? How are you getting along? Anything like that?
No,
they were supposed to, but the kids would have to go and originate to them. But I was lucky because Pineapple lived right across the passageway from me. So if I go to my cabin, she or her husband might hear me and invite me in for mint tea and would sit around and would chat. So I was luckier than most because I had Pineapple right across the corridor.
Yeah, and Janis can't use the person's name, but Pineapple was the nickname that the person was known as.
Well, that was because one day I went banging on her door, and she'd been sleeping, and she'd dyed her hair and she had it wrapped in a towel, and she said, "Oh, I fell asleep with my hair with the dye in my hair." And she pulled it off, and her hair's like spiking out like this, and it's like this pineapple color. And that's when I laughed at her. I said, "Oh, you look like a pineapple." So I always call her Pineapple.
That's brilliant. Love that. Yeah. No, so no Mark, nobody, no terminal. So I guess that's part of why it was so painful. There was nobody. And I remember crazy. And we were at sea one night, and Alex Sabersky came down with his wife and Maggie, right? Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a massive verbal row. He was really screaming his head off at her. And I was feeling numb. I mean, you could have pinched me and I wouldn't have felt it. You could have thrown me overboard and I would have just sunk. I was just nothing. And I turned my head to look where this argument was coming from, and he saw me look, and what are you effing looking at? And he came spitting in my face, and I didn't react at all. I had no emotion whatsoever. I was just done. So from there, I hit the RPF's RPF because I wasn't making any gains. And, that was really bad because you're not allowed to even talk to the RPF. I was just doing physical work every day.
You must have felt trapped.
Totally, Mark. That's exactly how it was. I had nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere.
Well, she has no money.
No.
So it's like she can't even go back to England.
Nothing.
I know what I know what it was like. You have nowhere to go.
No. And they had
nobody watching you.
No, and they had my passport. It's not like I could.
You're a prisoner.
Yeah, I was a prisoner. Anyway, to become even more of a prisoner, LRH ordered Hannah Eltringham to lock me up in the chain locker of the ship. So with another girl called Lisa. She was an African-American girl, and she kept singing a song every day, which was Coffee, Tea, or Me. I don't know what it was or why. She drove me nuts. But anyway, we were sitting, and just to give you a picture, where the anchor is kept, the chains are they called shackles? I don't know what the chains, the links. They're massive. Yes. They're massive, and they're wet, and they're rusty. And that smell of wet metal. It's just a horrible, nasty smell. And there was nothing. There's no light. The only light was a chink of light where the anchor would go down. And I was just terrified that they would let anchor go. If the anchor had been let down while we were locked up, we would have been killed. Yeah. And we were there for 3 days and 3 nights. And we were fed food like animals in there. We were not taken out to have meals. I was taken out to the toilet. And it was at that time that Bruce was put in the room above me.
Oh, Bruce Welsh. Okay. That's a whole other subject.
And I heard it all. And I was locked up. Yeah. And that was.
Now, I have a question for you. Why would Hubbard why did he say put her in the chain locker or whatever?
I don't know. Do you know, Janis? I don't know why he locked us up.
No, I don't know. But they put you in the forward chain locker, not the aft one.
Yeah.
Oh, because I always knew of people in the aft chain locker.
No, forward, 100% forward.
Wow. Okay.
Next to that laundry room.
My other question, Danielle, for you is, other than when you saw Hubbard when you first got on the ship looking down with the messengers, did you ever have any other interactions with him on the Apollo?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So quite often he would be outside his office just looking down with smoking his cigarette, his cools, and a messenger would be holding his ashtray. And he would be, talking or barking orders or whatever. But you could tell what mood he was in. I mean, you could hear if he was having a tantrum, and you would stay away. I think everybody in the ship knew when LRH was having a tantrum. It was enormous.
You couldn't miss it.
It was, and there were times too. Mary Sue had a dog, not Vixie. She bought another Tibetan Terrier or something.
Yeah, she had 2, Yama and Tashi.
And when she brought them on the ship, we all had to be really quiet because they'd had a sedation, and she didn't want them to have any restim and engram. So we had to be really quiet I remember that. But LRH would go, "Oh, hi, honey." He always used to call us honey. "Hi, honey, how you doing?" And smile a big grin. But he never really engaged me in conversation. But there was one time I was cleaning his galley. He had that little galley.
And be deck forward.
Yeah. And he came. I remember him coming out and just saying, good job, or something like that. But I was terrified because he hated smells, and we had to be very careful about what we used for cleaning and everything. I was really scared that he'd smell something, I was always on tenterhooks when he was around. It's like, am I doing anything wrong, And then another time I was on my hands and knees like Cinderella, polishing that green floor outside his office, and he threw a tantrum, and all I was aware I was cleaning, and suddenly these papers flew in the air, and he was screaming, "What the?" He was really loud, and I was so scared because when he went off, I don't know how to describe it other than his voice was so booming, it went through you. that's how I felt when I was right outside his office. And Tony Dunleavy came scuttling in. I don't know, he came rushing in. I don't know what was going on. And I still to this day, no idea. But something had displeased him. And I made him, I left there pretty damn quick, really. Yeah. But so we saw him out. Yeah. And he was so grumpy too, because he'd broken his arm in a motorbike accident. So I remember him walking around nursing his arm, and he had these Harleys, didn't he, that he had to have taken on and off the ship if he wanted to go out for the day. He had these Harley Davidsons.
Yeah, but after that motorbike accident,
he didn't have, no, that's it then.
Yeah.
I remember Arthur running around. Yeah.
Yes.
All with these little comics and lighting his farts. He was
Arthur was one of those kind of kids that.
This is Hubbard's youngest son. Son.
But you would say something to him, and he was the type of kid that repeated it back. And every time you said something, he repeated it back to the point you're not having a conversation; you're just hearing back everything you just said. And he even did that when he was on the walkie-talkie in the aft, and he was supposed to get the message and relay the message to the line handlers. And instead, he's not doing that. He's repeating back what the aft in charge is asking him. He just, and it's like, we're docking. You can't be doing this.
Oh, crikey. I mean, I can only surmise, Mark, that LRH just didn't like children. I just, I don't think he knew what to do with us, really.
Sorry, it's Misha.
All right. But I had to petition him to be allowed to leave the ship. After 3 days and 3 nights, I was locked up in the laundry room next door to where I'd been. And then I was offloaded, and Robin Scott escorted me back to the UK. And from there, immediately I became more sort of, I don't know, settled and happier because I was back with my family.
There's no way to describe your experience on the Apollo other than child abuse. I mean, it is actual child abuse. You're 12, 13 years old, and you're subjected to those conditions with nobody in charge of you. It's absolutely child abuse. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, and it went on. There was more of it later, and I just feel my motivation for doing this now, because I thought about doing it for years, is it cannot be allowed to go unnoticed and unchallenged. I was listening to Relatable Reese the other day, and she was playing some phone calls, and they, obviously more recent, and they're still going on about it's changed now, things are different. That doesn't let you off the hook. Say that to Danny Masterson's victims.
Right.
You cannot get away with this, and it should not be allowed to be gotten away with.
And I don't believe it has changed, because there's certain people in there who are going to keep holding it in place.
Yeah. And I just feel that justice has got to be served, because it is abuse, and it's continuing and continuing and continuing, and it is wrong. It is wrong, and it's unjust.
Yes, absolutely.
All of it is, though. I mean, even when we were in the Clearwater at the Flag Land Base, and we had a nursery, and also I'm sure in PAC in the nursery there, I mean, these children were just neglected, and you can blame the parents, but really the parents, though, they were having to stick to this ungodly schedule where they couldn't see their kids, so you were damned if you do or damned if you don't. And it's just the system that Hubbard set up, and the way that they handled children was just abominable. It's just terrible.
But having lived that, when I was writing my books, I had a non-Scientology friend reading them over, and he says to me one day, he says, you were abused. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. It's like, you were abused. Mm. And he had to tell me like 3 times before I was like, I was? Mm. Yeah, I was. Because I would never have allowed that with my children.
No.
Right.
you know. And even I remember when my kids were 11, I'd look at them and go, what were my parents thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but
Exactly.
as a child raised that way, I did not see it as abuse until here I am, like in my 40s or 50s or something, and then someone's pointing it out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm back at St. Hill, and I'm going to school, and I'm doing reception work, and I'm doing letter regging with the central files, and I'm working for Mimeo, printing out policy letters. And then I start my A-levels, and a guy called John Chadder, who works for Jane Kember, came and got me out of school and said, you cannot finish your A-levels. We're not clearing the planet with you being at school. And he yanked me away from finishing my education. How
old were you?
How old would I have been? 15, 16,
oh, wow,
15?
Okay.
Yeah. And then he said, right, you're going to go and work for Judy Tampion, who's the assistant guardian UK, and her secretary was Kathy Sproul. And I think Kathy's in OSA, I'm not sure, she was, along with another guy called Graham Wilson that I knew at Happy when I went there on mission once. He's still there. Graham was a nice...
Just so everybody knows, Happy was the name of the Scientology organization in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So I'm working for Judy Tampion and for GOUK. And then I am sent. No, then we move to St. Mary's in Rottingdean. This is a big old converted nunnery. So Folo UK moves there, and I move with Judy Tampion there. Kathy doesn't, I don't think Kathy came. And then I'm sent to Flag Land Base in Clearwater to do my OEC FEBC after just having done a mission to Happy for 3 months. So that's how it went.
Now, OEC FEBC is the organization executive course and the flag exec briefing course.
Yeah.
And that was for our high level executives to be trained. And when I was talking to Danielle earlier, Janis, that in '81 when she did it, that was when John Horwich and Jay Hurwitz were brought back to Clearwater, and there was a big push by management, because I was there at the time, to train executives all over the world.
Yeah, and I had known Jay and been very friendly with his wife as well and family prior to that, so I felt a little happier that I had somebody there who was a friend, and he's a friend to this day. He's always been a great person and friend to me. And then I went to cramming because I had some issues with maths, and I went to see Chuck in Quoll, and he was really great. But I was there for a couple of months in cramming, but I learned a lot. But I actually really enjoyed my time in Clearwater. I had a sense of freedom. We could eat better food because at St. Hill we'd been on beans and rice, soya beans and rice. So it was
you're eating in the lemon tree or the
hibiscus tree. No, in the auditorium.
It was auditorium, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. No, the lemon tree had become public dining, and yeah, we ate in the auditorium, like you said.
But at night we would go down. There were two restaurants, Mark, weren't there? One on the left was for public, and the one on the right,
the Hourglass.
So we'd go to the Hourglass at night, and we'd have some lovely yogurts or something like that. And it was
they had like a canteen.
Yeah, and and at night after course we could walk down to the beach. We used to walk. I know it's a bit of a walk, but we used to take ourselves down to the beach. But we were living in a pit. We were. I want to say we started off, I think, studying in the bank building first before we moved over to the Fort Harrison.
That's correct.
And there was the QI building birthing.
I think the QI was for the nursery and parents, but you're probably thinking the heart of Clearwater.
Mm-hmm.
We were then moved to a motel.
Yeah, the heart of Clearwater.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, the carpets were sticky. and there were roaches, and it was dreadful. And I wear contact lenses, and I used to have to put them on in the dark. I became really good at that.
Now, let me. I want to move forward because we're getting close to the end of our time here. But
right. Okay,
so when did you? How long did you stay in the Sea Org, and when did you
then I did the OEC FEBC for a year. Came back as LRH Com UK at FOLO at St Mary's, and then the S hit the fan, and the Commodore's Messengers org was getting big, and people like Simon Wackley, Brad Gentry. All these sort of people were taking over, and the CO blew, and I was put on the RPF, and I was really peed off about that because there's no way that I should have gone to the RPF. And there was a very a prominent member of the public who was not liked, who had a committee of evidence, and I insisted that the committee of evidence follow policy. And of course, they weren't going to listen to that, were they? So no, despite what I'd said, they sort of said that I was siding with him, and then, declared me and everything. And I was just so peed off. Anyway, I was put on the RPF with people like Sheila Gaiman, Claire Gaiman. I can't remember all the people, but this is back at Stonelands. So they sent me back to Stonelands to join the RPF. After a few months, I said, that's it. I don't deserve to be here. I don't want to be here anymore. My mother had had a stroke in 1980 and they kicked her out. Before she'd even hit the hospital for treatment, she'd literally just arrived, and two people from St. Hill, I won't name them, but they turned up at the hospital and said, Scientology can heal her. We're taking her out of hospital. And she never got the treatment. And when you have a stroke, you need that treatment as soon as possible.
Yes.
Yep.
And she was paralyzed down her left side, taken back to Stonelands and put in a room. She could not move. She could not walk. She was like a dead stone. And my sister, 14 years old, was looking after her and all of the children in the house at night on her own. And there was a house fire at Stonelands, and she rescued children in the fire herself because there were no adults around. Anyway, another story. But
crazy.
She then got a nurse, a lovely lady called Anna Rutherford, and she called Anna, and Anna said, no, this isn't right, and called her GP, and her GP admitted her to hospital again. And from there, they just kicked her out. No support, nothing. And she'd been working for 3 weeks till 3 o'clock every morning on some project, and she was done in, and she had this stroke, and she was 42. And I think they all left, my sister left and everybody left. And I thought, that's it. I'm not staying around for this. So I put in a CSW and just, petitioning people to leave, and invented that I'd had some kind of bills to pay, which I didn't. And I left. They gave me some breathing space. And after about 6 weeks, the CMO came knocking on the door, phoning, knocking on the windows, trying to get me back. And I wouldn't go back. And that was it.
What year was this?
1982.
Was that Ginger Smith?
Sorry?
Was that Ginger? Ginger Smith? Yeah, she was in charge of the CMO in the UK.
Oh, do you know, I don't remember. Remember. No, I can't remember. I'm sorry. I don't remember who it was.
That's okay.
And then what happened? Something happened. Right. So at this point, Herbie Parkhouse, you know, the whole story with Jane and Mary Sue and everybody and Mo Budlong. Yeah. David Gaiman. Now, so David had been declared and he was doing his reparation and he was at home and he needed a secretary. And he asked me to help him. So I was his housekeeper secretary because I needed a job. And I was cleaning he taught me to write my first check. You know, I'd never been taught anything like that.
Right.
You know, I had no basic skills. I could clean toilets to kingdom come, you know, but I didn't know how to write a check. Anyway, he taught me about money and how to manage money and things like that, because I'd never been taught, never had any teaching of that. And I really enjoyed my time with him. But one day I was at the kitchen sink cleaning dishes and Sheila came in and she was on the RPF, but he was going through his A2E. And so she said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I knew full well I shouldn't have, because he was he'd been declared and everything. I was going to be, PTS, and I mustn't be there, etc. And I didn't care. But anyway, she kicked me out. And he never apologized, or I never saw him again. But she called me for coffee a couple of weeks later, and I went for coffee, and all she did is try and get me to come back in again. No apology.
When did you meet Neville?
Okay, so when I was 11, Nev's known me since I first came to Stonelands. And then when I was 21, we dated for a while after I left. I was also taken, wait for this, Janis, you know who else took me out for a date? Otto Ruth.
He's so old.
I was 21. But anyway, I don't know if I can couch this. I'm going to have to be careful how I say this. Just basically, I said no, okay? At a moment where someone else turned, right? Okay. So he took me to dinner, wine and dine me with his fancy car. This is Otto. And I said no. Anyway, I'll tell you another story. So that was a no. And then Nev and I dated for a bit. And then Nev's 14 years older than me. And he wanted to get married, have kids. And I just, I was just out, 21. I hadn't seen the world yet. And that's why I sent you those photos, Mark, of having a good time and what have you. Just to prove that, the WOG world out here is not, it's great. And it's not what
you mean something like this?
That's me in Greece, yeah.
Having a drink.
Just a bit sozzled, yeah. With my mullet.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Anyway, so it was great fun, and I had a blast. I really did. And then all these years later, I happened to be working very near where his daughter lives, and his wife sadly had passed away. And we met up in a pub, and we just went from there again, and we just got together again, and we got married in 2018. So it was great fun. It was really good. But I'll just tell you this one thing real quick. So I was working at a clinic in London for a guy who'd been in Scientology in East Grinstead. And I had a great job, really enjoyed working for him. And I was sitting on reception one day and I stretched, right? And Otto walked in and he looked at me and he sighed and he said, "You never forget those who say no." That was in the
I didn't know Otto Roos, but he must have been a real ladies' man or something. I don't know. I just don't.
That's not the half of it, Mark. You just
that's not half of it. Otto had more than one woman in his cabin at a time. And he was he was something else. And he had probably 3 to 5 girlfriends all going at once.
Wow.
Whether they were all together or different nights.
When we went out on our date, his secretary came along.
And then she ended up with him alone.
Oh, yeah, probably. I was saying no.
That's funny. Well, listen, Danielle, we're going to wrap it up here. We'll have you on again because you're full of a lot of information and great stories. But I'm really sorry about the abuse. The child abuse on the high seas on the Apollo. It's just terrible.
I think
it's really important to mention that when I was 14, I was, and I'm going to be open about it, but I don't know if I can say the word, so I won't. Okay, so. The worst that can happen when it happened to me when I was 14. And I was sent to ethics because it was my fault, apparently. This guy was in his 20s and I was 14. And nothing happened to him, as far as I'm aware. I was sent for sec checking.
It's similar stories to Amy. Amy Scobie has a similar story.
Yeah.
And Danny Masterson, his victims, the same story.
Yeah. And Monica Carino was the MAA at the time. I don't know if she's still around. But I
don't think so.
No, not great. But but I did want to get that in because it's important, because that's one of the things that was never addressed, and it should never be allowed to happen.
Absolutely.
And it's happened to other people just like you, the same thing, and it's treated the same.
Yeah. And also the forced abortions, because I know of 2 people who were forced to have abortions, and boy, that's wrong. That is so wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
It's terrible.
I'm so glad I left when I did, because we left at just the right time, I think. They stopped
Trust me.
newspapers, they stopped television. Yeah.
Trust me, we're glad we left when we did too.
Yeah. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Well, Danielle, we really appreciate you being on here. I'm going to,
Thank you for having me.
we'll have you on again, like I said, but you can read more about them. Just to segue here, Janis wrote a book, 2 books actually, about her time, A Child Adrift in Scientology Sea Organization. That's Janis right there with L. Ron Hubbard. And she goes into more in-depth stories about her time on the Apollo as a young girl, you know. And so anyway, her book, both of her books, autographed, are available on our merchandise site, which is now on our YouTube page. Just go to our store. You can click on there. And if you're interested in an autographed copy or of either one of Janis's book or both of them, you can order them at the store. And then we have other merchandise now available on our store that you can order as well. And we would appreciate the support to any of our viewers if you want to help out and back up our channel. Okay, so we can have more stories like this. Yes, Danielle.
Do you ship to the UK?
I don't know. I have to check. Fourth Wall is who handles that. Let me check and I'll let you know, Danielle. Okay. Because I saw today when I was looking at Fourth Wall that we can actually designate different prices, you know, converting the price in US dollars to like the pound or euros or pounds or whatever, you know. And so cool. I'll check on that and I'll let you know.
Great.
I'll let you know. And also, we appreciate you being a member of our channel as well. And anybody out there watching who wants to be a member, you know, more so than a subscriber, just click on that join button on our YouTube page and follow the instructions there. And we would appreciate the support on that. Okay. Anyway, please subscribe to our channel. Okay. All that sort of stuff. And if you have any other questions or any questions at all, actually, because we didn't do this as a live stream, ask it in the comment section. If you have questions for Danielle, you can ask them in there as well. We'll relay them to her. And we look forward to hearing from you all your viewers on this show. Danielle or Janis? Yes, go ahead, Janis.
Yeah, well, Danielle's usually always in the chat when we go live. So you can also ask Danielle questions in the chat.
That's true. That's true. Janis, have you got anything else you'd like to say?
No, just have a good day and keep rock slamming that like and coming back and enjoying these with us.
Thanks,
anything
guys.
else from you?
Thanks,
anything
Danielle.
else from you, Danielle?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Don't hang up. We're going to stop the recording and then we'll talk some more. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody. 1 second here. We will see you later.